Okay, so this time we're going to look at doing what I call sequential if statements. So just as a reminder, we have three text boxes, which the user is going to enter a number in, or is supposed to enter a number in, and we're going to validate whether or not that is in fact a number. The first time we did it, we did nested if statements. So that looked, well, let me just number these 1, 2, and 3. And so our nested if statements looked like if 1, and then if 2, and then if 3, and then we had error conditions. Whoops, that one should have been blue. Else. So, and if you got to here, that meant everything passed and you did your processing in the middle here. And if anything failed, you went to the associated if statement and printed the error message and handled the error for that one failure. So a couple of things that I think we could do better. One is that this processing being kind of in the middle of things is a little harder to understand, and the cascading if statements are a little bit harder to understand. Also, from the user's perspective, from usability, even if all three fields are wrong, it will only flag one field as being wrong at a time, and then the user will correct that, and then the next field will show up as being wrong. So if we do a different technique, sequential if statements, it requires keeping track of whether or not anything failed. So the way we keep track is with a flag. We use a Boolean variable for that. We'll call it valid flag. And we started off being true. So we're going to assume everything is successful. So if 1 validates, or actually I say if, let me rephrase that. We're testing if it's not valid. So I'm going to say if not, and remember we learned that just negates things. So if not, 1 validates. We could be using try parse or any other validation criteria. So if it doesn't validate, then we're going to set our flag equal to false. And then we'll do whatever error handling we need to do. So in this case, it's going to be set a message, etc. I'll have an else here. If it does validate, I'm not going to change the flag. It starts at true, and I'm only going to change it if something doesn't validate. But I am going to clear any error labels, etc. Maybe any messages or anything that were set there for the user. If it validates, I clear them. So if it doesn't validate, I set my valid flag to false, do any error handling, and if it does validate, then I clear any error messages. Excuse me. So, and then I do the same for field 2. And then I do the same for field 3, which I was doing in brown. Okay, and this is just pseudocode to give you an idea. And then once I get down to the bottom here, now, if my validate flag is still true, then I can do my processing. If any one of these things has failed, then I'm not going to do my processing because I have an error condition in one of my fields. One of them didn't validate. But if they all validate, then I can go ahead and do my processing. Okay, so let's have a look at, okay, as you see, I can enter all digits, and it calculates the sum and average. if I put some text in there, whichever ones have text, can't be converted to or parsed into integers, I put up an error message, and I don't do the calculation. Though I leave the calculation from last time up, maybe that would be smart to remove that on an error condition. Okay, so let's have a look at how I do this. As I said, I'm doing sequential if statements, so I still have the same setup. I set up my 3 local integer variables. I set up local sum and average to do the calculations or processing in. And then I set up this validate flag, which I initialize to true. So I start with a true, and then I go through my validation for each section. If the try parse is not successful, I set the validate flag to false, and then I do my error handling. Once I get down to here, all 3 fields have been validated. They either have an error message set or they don't. If any one field has failed validation, then my validate flag has been set to false. So if the validate flag is set to false, I know not to do any processing because not all the fields are valid. So I go ahead and do the processing if I have valid fields. So if the flag is still true, I do my processing, and if the flag is false, I don't, and I return control to the user, and they can modify any fields that are, fix any fields that are wrong, and then go ahead and do the processing. Okay, so that is sequential if statements.